Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. I remember way back 1957, I was a young student studying in a high school and received a message from the Prime Minister's office inviting me to attend a meeting with the Prime Minister. Wow! You can imagine a 15-year-old boy receiving a message from the Prime Minister. So I went there, and Pandit Nehru was gracious enough to give me a few minutes and told me that he'd like to send me to Egypt as his personal envoy and that I must receive training from a renowned person, Mr. Huxell, before going there. Now, the word envoy created in me an image of an aura of glitter, glamour, meeting high officials. And now those 7 days of training, I was told it's not. You are walking on thin ice all the time and walking on a razor edge. Imagine yourself on a precipice. Any side you fall is an abyss. And it's a razor's edge, it can cut your teeth. And it's a thin ice. But outside people think glitter and a media attention would be there. The protocol extended to you is amazing. But to be able, and then I learned that to be able to swim in the choppy sea, where currents of the various structures come and create whirlpools, is diplomacy. You have to be a good swimmer to bypass one whirlpool after the other. And now let me tell you, when I put this yesterday, that I'm going to talk about this, one friend, Mr. Singh Jaspal of Mississauga, wrote that is it chaplusi? Chaplusi is a Hindi word for flattery. No, it's not. You don't flatter anybody, but you try to please people. The Winston Churchills oft repeat saying that the diplomat's life for the good of the country back home is again partly correct but not fully correct. Diplomacy is an art, and I learned it at that young age when learning is much easier. It's combining skills to be able to wage a war with the equanimity of a peacenik. Look like a dove and attack like an eagle. It's an uncanny, almost weird ability to smoothen all the ruffled feathers while being nice to some and shockingly offensive to the others. And the persons with whom you are nice cannot imagine that you can be that offensive, and the people to whom you are offensive cannot believe that you can be nice as well. I remember my daughter-in-law, elder daughter-in-law, one day said, after about 6 months of marriage, Papa, you can make feel people eat up your hand, and the next moment they receive a kick, and they don't know it's coming. She had watched me. It's right. So it's an art of behavior being attuned, modified according to the person, time, need, but for the good of the country. You know, the 4 months I spent as a special envoy to Egypt was the greatest period of my life. Being feted and received at the highest level has done by itself. It was a special job, of course. I had to report on Aswan Dam being built and removing other temples under UNESCO scheme. So it was not an envoy. It was not an ambassador. It was, as a matter of minister plenipotentiary for a certain purpose. So I was, at the age of 15, introduced to this work. And now I find that at the present level, one foreign minister, now diplomacy is at various levels. It starts with the Prime Minister, but then it ends. The real start is with the Foreign Minister. And then it percolates to the lowest level at the embassy. But then the whole team is responsible. And I find that the Russian Federation Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is today one of the finest and the longest serving foreign minister. And I have been observing him. And I find that in addition to his long tenure in the Foreign Office, he was earlier permanent representative of Russia into United Nations. And this gentleman, very suave, very polished, is epitome of what diplomacy should be. He is very friendly, but still is very cool and keeps his distance. I remember him sharply snubbing the American Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice. She had gone to a trip to Moscow and she approached him in the same brash manner as she did others. She was very brash, very rude, least, I shouldn't say cultured, but least bothered about the sentiment of others. And the treatment she received, and imagine, the American Secretary of State, of course at the same level, but she had a sharp rebuke, snubbing from Lavrov. And when it came to National Secretary General, he was more devastated. He told him that he should apply for a new job because he wasn't any good in the present one. And in the evening at the dinner table, he regaled us with this anecdote at least 4 times. At the Security Council, where he represented a permanent veto-wielding member, the Russian Federation, he has been known for killing boredom by sketching and doodling. Now imagine a diplomat, sharp as a razor, doodling, sketching. And the cartoons were real good. And a couple have been published in a book. Incidentally, I also remember reading that Lord Mountbatten's press secretary, Alan Campbell Johnson, wrote a book, Mission with Mountbatten. And it has a copy of Qaeda-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's doodle, which he drew during a meeting. He was talking to the viceroy and other leaders and he started doodling. So what he did, when the meeting was over, Jinnah wrapped that doodling paper, threw in the waste paper basket. Campbell Johnson retrieved it from the waste paper basket and then put it in his book. The truth is that diplomacy is not that simple. If Sergei Lavrov differs from his president, he is among the foreign ministers and the foreign secretaries who have disagreed with the Prime Minister or the foreign minister. And yet, even after disagreeing with the dictator, they retain their hold. This is something very exceptional. On the eve of Second World War, now historical perspective is important. And I'm talking about the different people to give you an idea how this art is perfected. I've seen them do it. I have seen them evolve and I see that they have set an example. On the eve of Second World War, I was telling you, the Prime Minister of England at that time, Chamberlain, the man who signed the Munich Agreement, and capitulated before Hitler. He kicked upstairs the Permanent Secretary to the Foreign Office, Sir Robert Benstert. He was opposing Chamberlain's policy of appeasement. And he was replaced by Sir William Strong. Now, the moment Chamberlain was removed and Churchill came back, then Sir Robert Benstert came back. So, but, see, this permanent secretary is removed. But here, Lavrov is continuing for such a long time, despite his opposing his superiors. If you remember, Margaret Thatcher had started the Falkland Wars in 1982, and she shook the Foreign Office because, in her opinion, it had misled her. She appointed an advisor on foreign affairs in her own office who was much more in tune with her. President Harry Truman is said to have regarded his own State Department as a hostile foreign power. And he would take rough shot over the Secretary of State and take decisions. When Mrs. Gandhi met Golda Meir, I happened to be with her, and at one state dinner she said that the diplomatic professionals to be polished, excessively inclined to understand points of view, and afflicted with analytical intellectual habits that make them communication and understanding between them difficult. So this, I think, about the epitome and the finest definition of a diplomat. I noted it down. I repeat. I consider the diplomatic professionals to be top polished, excessively inclined to understand diverse points of view, and they also suffer from analytical intellectual habits, made communication and understanding between them difficult. So see, very precise and very concise. There was another diplomat, Israeli diplomat, and he was a politician, Abba Edan. And when Golda Meir said this, he remarked, well, Golda's talent lies in simplification of the issue. And the other people serving on her staff said she went straight to the heart of the problem. In contrast to her, what she said, Iba said that the foreign policy experts understood the complexity of diplomatic relations and the elements that form the decision and policies. These experts react with resignation to the idea that Israel's vital interests are not that vital to the non-Israelis. Now, that's the issue. What is important to you may not be important to your next door neighbor. But then, you have got to ensure that your interests are not sacrificed at a level where the animosity becomes patently clear. Now, the diplomats have to be aware of the nature of the profession in which the external situation can create internal challenges. The problem with the foreign policy, which common people don't understand, media doesn't understand, is that a nation's sovereignty has less influence than in any other field of public policy. It's not the sovereignty, it's the interest. People mistake often the sovereignty for the interest. And that's why among her comments about Golda Meir are important. Since she was a tough character with a dominant streak, with temptation for the senior officers to adapt their advice to her prejudices very, very strong. They wanted to please her. But when she was a foreign minister, habits of consultation were not there. Apparently the word analysis provoked her to irritability. And that was not only her, Mrs. Gandhi, Margaret Thatcher. They had strong streaks, and what they wanted, they got it done. And when the analysis was presented to them, at least one of them, Madam Gandhi, always used to say, well, my hunch says, do this. You remember, 1971 war. The railway minister, Jagjivaram, and Chavan, these two, were not very much in favor of the action. And Manik Shah had complained to the Prime Minister. So she called these ministers, she called her group of 4 advisors and told them that in case next time is there will be immediately a letter of dismissal from the President's house, the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And Golda Meir and Indira Gandhi resembled that way. And they were very clear that when the analysis and the contradictory ways of influence flowed from to decision making, they will interrupt them with an abrupt request, come to the point, cut short. Now, getting the point simple is not easy because truth is not so simple. So, a diplomat has to ensure that the suggestions not only are in the interest of the country but also openly don't go against the wish of the boss. Now, diplomats are not blameless, let me tell you. They live in a cocoon. They are very rarefied atmosphere of the elevated circles. And they are mostly ignorant of the public opinion. And here is where the Prime Minister does the job. And the Foreign Minister has to correlate the diplomatic and the political aspects. So a wise Foreign Minister bridges the divide between his officials and diplomats, and the parliamentarians who voice public opinion, and the Prime Minister. Now, what happens is that the public opinion at home tends to overestimate the luxury, the dignity, and ease in which the diplomats live. They think, wow, they are being pampered. And they underestimate the personal risks and the torment of conscience inherent in that task. In most nations, the public opinion is in constant revolt against foreign policy. You might have seen it. Precisely because this domain in which the public will is not supreme. Now imagine it. In the present Ukraine crisis, Government of India maintained neutrality while whatever article I would read, whatever newspaper was there, they were saying, well, we should not annoy USA. And some people, even Rajmohan Gandhi wrote that we should not buy cheap oil, we should not fall into that. Bloomberg wrote at least 5 articles on that. So the constraints imposed by the international system are supreme. But they are blamed on the ministry. Because ministry mediates between the nation and the external realm. This is the bridge between the domestic and the foreign. And even in the capital, foreign minister officials are in danger of living outside the social reality because they are enclosed in the special diplomatic world. And the people don't understand. So art is to correlate the foreign and the home. And it's a duty, bound and responsibility of the politician who has the foreign ministry, the foreign minister to serve as a mediator between the politicians and professional diplomats. And that's what Lavrov is doing. And if you remember, we had excellent foreign minister, but we had useless foreign ministers as well. Sharan Singh was one of not so good a foreign minister, if you remember that. They could not bridge the gap because they were only carrying out the orders. But bridging the gap is much more important than carrying the orders. The present one, brought up, trained as a diplomat, Jaishankar, is an excellent one. So we have got to see that people, remember one foreign minister who made a hell of it in Security Council for India, S.M. Krishna. He went to Security Council, he had to read his own speech. What he did was that before his speech was a speech of Minister of Portugal. So he picked that up and started reading it, and then he said, as Foreign Minister of Portugal, I say. And then he continued it, and his assistant, secretary, our permanent, was telling at his court, sit down. So this is, as I said, walking on a precipice, walking on a razor's edge. And the diplomat who can do it are really, really successful. And they are gems to be treasured and to be listened to. Thank you.